What I just done read.
Excuse me a second while I just put myself back together, as it were. Hello there, welcome back to What I Just Done Read. This is my Bohemian Book Corner, and this is a book review show designed to give a fair airing to books of all ages, not just those currently gracing the bestsellers or the new releases lists. Today's book certainly isn't a new release, but I think it may well have been a bestseller when it came out. I must admit I didn't have a chance to check. But it is The Iron Man by Ted Hughes. Before we come on to the book itself, just as always want to say thank you to everybody who's been checking out the channel recently. It's a joy to see. If you do like what we do here, then please do all the usual: like, share, subscribe, and spread the word to those who enjoy interesting content. Hopefully it's interesting. You'll have to tell me. Do you think it is? Yeah, it never says anything. Before we look at the book and get into all of that stuff, we just have our regular business of the word of the day. And as today's book was written by someone who was ostensibly a poet, our word today is scop. It's S-C-O-P. And scop is an Old English version of the Old Norse word skald, and a skald or a scop is synonymous with another Old English term, a gleeman, which is a lovely word, isn't it? Gleeman. A gleeman was a travelling oral poet. So there's a slight difference between the two of them. A scop would have been more court-bound, and so had probably a better life expectancy than a gleeman who were travelling. Predominantly, they would recite, say, old pagan folklore and legends, mostly the legends and tales of old Germanic tribes, but would also be responsible for eulogising their lord and master as well. Thought it was a lovely little word. I'd never heard of it before, and I quite like it. I mean, I don't know how you'd want to use that in your own writing. Maybe if you are a vocal poet yourself and are feeling a little bit pretentious, like most vocal poets tend to be, then you can style yourself as a scop. Or, say you're playing a bard in something like D&D or something, maybe you can call your character, Merry Bottom the Scop. How's that? Although, taking into account today's book, maybe Iron Bottom the Scop. I shall leave that to your imagination. But anyway, there it is. Scop, Old English word. Take it, make it your own, and give it some love. So, moving swiftly on, we are talking about the Iron Man. That's the Iron Man to us here in the UK. To those of you watching this over the pond, you'll know it better as the Iron Giant, as it was changed both the title of the book and all references to the Iron Man in the story itself when it was published in the US, so as not to confuse it with a certain other Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
Yes. That one. But this was by Ted Hughes. So we'll do our bullet point biography for Mr. Hughes. As I said, he was a former poet laureate, but before that, Ted Hughes, born Edward James Hughes on the 17th of August 1930 in Mytholroyd, West Riding in Yorkshire, to William and Edith Hughes. He was the youngest of three children, his elder brother Gerald being 10 years his senior, and his sister Olwyn 2 years older than him. Hughes's father, William, served in the Lancashire Fusiliers during World War I and fought at the Battle of Ypres, at which time, and again in one of those absolutely mad events that happened in real life, his father's life was saved when he was shot and the bullet lodged in the paybook that was in his breast pocket at the time. His regiment would go on to fight in the Dardanelles campaign of 1915 to 1916, of which William Hughes was one of only 17 from the regiment to survive. The young Ted Hughes was regaled with tales by his father of his time at the Western Front, so much so that in Hughes's poem Out, he observed, "My first 6 years shaped everything." And it was during those first 6 years, in 1934, that the family moved to Mexborough, where Hughes's parents ran a newsagents. Hughes himself was brought up very much against the backdrop of that kind of brutal rural environment of working farms, the Yorkshire Dales, all of those kind of things, and later into his childhood was helping out his brother who had found work as a gamekeeper, and the young Hughes would often accompany him, and oftentimes serving as baiter while his brother was working as I say, as a gamekeeper. During his formative years, he became quite fascinated with wildlife and that kind of rural aspect. By his early teens, having become an accomplished shot and an avid fisherman, something that he had almost a religious dedication to through most of his life, apparently. Some of Hughes's earliest works, his poem The Thought Fox, and also a short story by the name of The Rain Horse, were his recollections of that early part of his life. So during his time at Mexborough Secondary School, Hughes's prodigious talent as a writer was spotted by his teachers, who very much encouraged him to pursue that line, even to the point of introducing him to some, really unimportant poets, the likes of Gerald Manley Hopkins and some guy called T.S. Eliot as well. I don't know who he is. This was back in the days when your teachers could still inspire you to do something great with your life. His first published work, which was a poem called Wild West, appeared in the school magazine in 1946. And by this point, Hughes knew within himself that he wanted to be nothing other than a poet. Following his national service, Hughes went on to study English at Pembroke College, although in his third year he swapped out his major of English for anthropology and archaeology. Later in his life, he cited the reasons for this being that he felt constrained by what he described as the terrible, suffocating maternal octopus of literary tradition and academia. Whether due to that late change in his major, or whether because of some underlying sort of lack of academic ability of his own, Hughes only graduated with a third in 1954, although saying that the time that he spent studying anthropology and archaeology would go on to inform and colour much of his later work. He then spent the next 18 months of his life living between London and Cambridge and engaged in a number of different jobs, including working for the London Zoo and also work for the Arthur J. Rank Film Company. Thank you. On the 25th of February 1956, whilst attending what did I put in here? It was a launch party for the St. Bolteth's Review, Hughes met award-winning American poet Sylvia Plath. Plath was in England on a Fulbright scholarship to Cambridge University and had attended the same event with the express purpose of meeting Hughes. The two shared a passion for poetry. And very quickly this developed into a passion for each other. And less than 4 months later, on the 16th of June, were married. They then spent the next 2 years living in the US, eventually returning in 1959 to the UK and settled in Primrose Hill in London. At this time, both were working both as poets and as writers. Hughes also producing work for programming for the BBC. Their two children, Frida and Nicholas, were born in 1960 and 1962 respectively, and in 1961 the young family bought a property in North Taunton, in Devon, and relocated there. But they still kept hold of the flat that they bought in Primrose Hill and sublet the flat to a young couple, both of whom were poets, German couple David and Assia Wyville. The following year, so not long after Nicholas's birth, Hughes embarked on an extramarital affair with Assia Wyville, and when this was revealed, led to the acrimonious split from Sylvia Plath, who, taking Nicholas and Frida, returned to London and found her own apartment there. Sylvia Plath, who anybody who knows anything about the poet will know that she suffered from depression for most of her adult life and was on a cocktail of different medications to support this and to help her through this. And no doubt, in part, fueled by her split from Hughes, took her on the 11th of February 1963. Cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning from the oven in her flat. This occurred whilst her two children were asleep in an upstairs bedroom. Of her death, in a private letter afterwards, Hughes wrote, "That's the end of my life. The rest is posthumous." I will touch upon a bit more about this a bit later in the review. It's something that we can't really avoid talking about because there was so much controversy surrounding this and how much culpability could be placed at Hughes's feet for this. But again, as I say, I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm more focused on Hughes and obviously on the book at this stage. In the wake of Plath's passing, Hughes wrote two poems, The Song of a Rat and The Howling Wolves, and then stepped away from poetry for approximately 3 years. This kind of brings us neatly up to today's book. The Iron Man was published in 1968. When the book was actually written, I couldn't really find out. I suspect it was written about 1964, 1965. I'm sure if anybody else knows better than me, then please do let me know in the comments below. Ostensibly, this is classed as a science fiction novel for children. It's been likened more to a modern fairy tale or a children's fable. And certainly when you read it, the kind of some of the gaps, if you like, in the realism of the narrative, as well as just the fantastical nature of the story in general, kind of lead me to believe that, yeah, absolutely, that's what I would classify it as well. The blurb on the back here, which is literally a selection of different soundbites or reviews of the book, kind of reinforce that as well. As it says, The Iron Man, a child's story in 5 nights by Ted Hughes. So there's a quote here from Robert Nye of The Times. Starts superbly with a clanking iron giant toppling from a cliff and lying smashed and scattered on the rocks below.
Go feed on the rocks below.
Then his various parts get up and stretch and search for each other. Hughes has never written more compellingly. Naomi Lewis of The Listener says, a weird, compelling fantasy told in a style of such ringing clarity that not one of its fearsome points can be possibly missed. And then there's a quote from The Observer as well, reckoned one of the greatest modern fairy tales. To follow on from that, I mean, definitely when I remember when I read it when I was 9 years old, I remember finding it really accessible. I mean, to the point where it felt like almost like it had been written for me. Obviously, clearly it hadn't. I didn't exist at the time when this was written. But as it turns out, and as I have since found out, it was actually written for his then still very young son, Nicholas, as a way of comforting him in the wake of Sylvia Plath's death. Unfortunately, Nicholas Hughes inherited his mother's turbulent battle, if you like, with mental health. And unfortunately, in 2009, at the age of 47, took his... Although, again, I do now wonder how much of that was nature and how much of that was nurture. I'm sure, knowing that he was, having been in the flat at the same time when his mother... I wonder how much of a profound effect that had on the young Nicholas. But again, as I say, I'll come back to that in a bit. I don't really want to say too much about the story itself because it is such a timeless classic. Basically, just to follow on from what the blurb says there, it's like this is the story of the Iron Man, whose origins are never really properly revealed. Following putting himself back together, he then becomes the object of a hunt by the local farming community. Kind of his own fault, because he goes around eating things like fences and tractors and combine harvesters, as a giant Iron Man would probably do. But ultimately, he finds a friend in the son of a local farmer by the name of Hogarth, who sees something more in this Iron Man, or eventually comes to see something more in this Iron Man, and goes out of his way to find a place for him within society. The story then builds from there to him effectively becoming a defender of mankind. When you want to go into a bit more of the subtext and the themes of the story here, in essence, it's designed to show children the virtues of personal bravery, having a sharp mind, and how having a sharp mind can trump violence. We're also learning to understand and to develop a degree of acceptance of the differences that exist between us all. Going a little bit deeper than that as well, it's very much about the persistence of life, even in the midst and the shadow of death. And this is all delivered effortlessly from, as I said, the pen of a man who would go on to become Poet Laureate. As to the product itself, so this is the later edition. This is, I think is this a first reprint? Or was it a later reprint? I think this is a later reprint. Yeah, so this is a reprint from 1989, but this is the 1985 edition, with, as it says, illustrations by Andrew Davidson. This isn't the one that I wrote. Not going to lie. I prefer the original edition of this, which is the one that I read. I remember it, if for nothing else, simply for the cover art, and that was with illustrations by Robert Nadler, and the cover art for that is iconic. There's something haunting and mysterious about it. Sure, I've got a poster of it somewhere. I think I bought one from the BFI shop in London at one point, but I think I've been waiting to get a proper frame to put it in. I'll put it on screen for you here so you can see it. It's delicious. It's probably the thing that, I think it was the cover art, which when I first spotted it was like, oh, what's this? As I said, there's something haunting and mysterious about it. And I seem to remember that the artwork in that complements the cover art. I mean, I said the artwork in this is pretty good. It's pretty good. So, you've got some examples like that. And again, there's sort of little bookends for the chapters, things like this there, if you can see that as well. So it's nice, and I do like it, but, as I say, the original one, the one that I read, is the one that I really liked, that really kind of captured my imagination. But I found this one, just by chance, in a great little second-hand bookshop here in Norwich called Ellis's, up on St Giles Street. If you've never been there, do go and check it out. What's in there does, complement the story perfectly. It never feels like it overstays its welcome. Something I think I've sort of touched on before with sort of books like these, especially books for children. Yes, okay, you've got those huge wide margins in there. But again, I don't mind those in a children's book. What I find with that is that, I don't know if you remember, again, you're like the first times when you actually sat down to read a book for yourself. There is something daunting about it. And just having those deep margins, there's a wonderful sense of achievement when you work your way through it as a kid. So I like that. I do like that. As always, I will have a few more things to say about this in a moment. But I am, at this point, going to do what I have a tendency to do, and that is go and finger some googly eyes. Stop it. And while I do, I'm going to leave you to contemplate how best you would best a star dragon the size of Australia. Xadrum is more than just curious content on YouTube. We're also a small publishing house, with books covering a range of genres from 1940s pulp adventure to children's novels, and even a touch of the macabre for those who like their literature on the dark side. Our titles are available in both paperback and ebook formats. Ebooks are available on Amazon, but physical copies can only be bought exclusively through our website at xadrum.com. Jeff's got enough cash as it is, so why not help us little guys grow and thrive? Links can be found in our banner and in the description to all of our videos, and we look forward to helping you indulge your itch for escapism. We'll come on to these in a moment. So as I said, I've got a few things to say about this, as I always do. I mean, as you can probably tell, I love this book. Yeah. So I first discovered this book when I was 9 years old at middle school at what was then St Thomas More Middle School here in Norwich, which I believe now is the St Francis of Assisi Primary Academy. I remember discovering it in the library there, and I kind of fell in love with it. I think I read it like 3 times before I had to return it. There was a few books. This was, I think, was the first one. There was about 3 or 4 books, and I loved them so much that even after I'd read them, I'd have them like on my lap, like under my desk in class, so I could like slip them out and have a quick read while the teacher wasn't looking. There was this, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim, The Phantom Tollbooth. There was another one. What was it? The Manx Mouse, if you know that one as well. This one more than any of the others, really. This is the book, I think, that opened my imagination to the concept of the fantastical. And it did more than that. It showed me that the fantastic doesn't really need any more explanation or even justification beyond the tacit acceptance of the reader for it to be believable. In terms of influences, or in terms of what's kind of shaped how I kind of approach fiction in general, whether it's as a reader or as a writer, thank you. A lot of it comes from this book. Beyond what I said already, this is a tale also that predominantly through the very kind soul of the boy character Hogarth in the story, it teaches children, that they're innocent, and their innocent approach to the wider world has merit. They can see things and achieve things where more staid and cynical, maturer minds fail. And I think that was something that was quite fundamental about the story, that even as a kid I took away before I knew anything more, or even bothered to look into anything more about like the history of the story's creation. And I'm not going to lie, this book still touches my heart and gets me in the feels, even reading it now, 40 years later. So not surprisingly, I am going to recommend this one. I mean, as I said, I've got a couple more things to say, but I might as well just get it out of the way now. Read this book. Definitely. If you're a kid and if you remember it from when you were a kid, go back and revisit it. If you have children, definitely get it, read it to them, or even better, if they're of the right age, let them read it. There's a lot to be taken from this. Unfortunately, again, I'd love to be able to just leave it there, but we can't, and again, increasingly as it seems to be in this day and age, we can't not, at the very least, touch on the controversy that surrounds this book and surrounds its author. Hughes came in for a lot of shit as a result of Sylvia Plath's death, and was accused of many, many, many things. And as I said earlier, I have no doubt that his extramarital affair did have an effect and was a contributing factor. In the years that followed that, he was demonised predominantly by members of the women's lib movement. In 1972, the author and activist Robin Morgan, in her book Monster, envisaged a group of fans of Plath basically kidnapping Hughes, beating him up, emasculating him, shoving his dismembered member down his own throat, and then killing him. Not surprisingly, Hughes threatened to sue, and the book was withdrawn from publication, although apparently it is still available in certain circles. Unfortunately, again, this wasn't helped by the fact that Assia Wyville, with whom he had the affair, when they went on to have a daughter together, herself committed in 1969 in basically the same method, carbon monoxide poisoning from a gas oven. Their daughter with her as well. There's been many things over the years that have been laid at his feet. There were letters that were released posthumously from Plath to her psychiatrist, in which she accused Hughes of physical abuse, which led to a miscarriage that would have been the second child before Nicholas. Again, this brings up this whole thing that we always seem to be coming back to these days of separating art from artist. I don't know all the details. No one does. And nobody ever will. There are other factors that need to be considered here beyond just demonising Hughes for his actions. I mean, he was a man of his time, should we say, and he was a man. And if you want to look at things from a purely biological point of view, as men we are designed to be more... Don't really want to use the word promiscuous, but that's the first one that comes to mind. It is how we are designed. It's a fundament of nature. If you don't believe me, then look up Bateman's principle. That kind of spells it out. And yes, okay, as learned and sentient creatures, we try and rise above the purely animalistic. But sometimes you can't do that, That's like kind of asking a tree to not be a tree. There's other factors to be to be included in this as well. For a start, there is the suggestion that Hughes and Plath had been talking about a reconciliation in the weeks leading up to her death. He also tried to get her medication changed, because it turns out the medication that she was on here in England was a medication that she suffered, or rather responded to badly, that she'd been prescribed when they were living in the States. That was marketed over here under a different name, so she may not have been aware that she was taking the same medication that had given her so many problems previously. There's also evidence to suggest that her death, which was her third attempt, was accidental. As I said, she was living in an apartment with her 2 children and was very aware, in fact to the point of having made a point of learning the routine of her neighbour, and had left a note that he would have found whilst leaving for a regular appointment. The inference being that the note was left on purpose for him to find, to give him enough time to force an entry into their flat and save her life. In other words, that this attempt was actually a cry for help. The one thing that she wasn't aware of or couldn't account for was that their 2 flats had an interlinking ventilation, as a result of which the carbon monoxide seeped into her neighbour's flat, rendering him unconscious, so he did not wake up in time to keep his appointment. I don't wish to draw any conclusions. I'm not going to side either way with who's at fault. Both Hughes and Plath have long since gone into the great hereafter, and what we do have from them are 2 distinct and powerful bodies of work. That is their legacy, I think, and I think that's the things that we should be focused on today, rather than who did what to whom back when. And amongst those, one of the best is The Iron Man. So, as I say, I reckon you should read this. I reckon everyone should read this. Going to the eyes, not surprisingly, it gets the big whopper dopper 5-eye for me for content. As I've said a few times already, it is a timeless classic and should definitely be read by everyone. I'm giving it the 4-eye for the product because, and again, this is personal preference, I prefer the original, the early edition, for it's predominantly for the artwork, but also nostalgia value. It's going to carry that one for me. There we go. And just because we haven't done it for a while, let's jiggle the eyes. Just to try and bring some levity back into this. It's curious to know, actually, as I go to the list to take this off. When I was looking at this and repeatedly going on stuff online, sort of doing research for this episode, when you look at the pictures of Hughes, you can see it in his eyes. Regardless of what his actions were at the time, you can see that he loved Plath very deeply. And if I'm misquoting, then I apologise. And it shows in the words of another great writer in the show, words of Tolkien, some wounds time cannot heal. And you see that. But anyway, let's take this one off the list. There we go. The Iron Man, down here at the bottom. Ka-ching. That one is gone. And in terms of what we're going to be doing next, I am going to be staying with the newer part of the list. I do want to get back to the original part of the list at some point, but that's going to... Instead, a lot of those books are a bit pricey, and I can't afford them at the minute. So, we're going to be going a bit further up. We're going to be staying out of the out of my normal realms of horror and the fantastical, with something a bit more contemporary, and any excuse just so I can use this clip again, but focused a bit more on murder. Oh, murder. With the Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This one I think I picked up from work, so thank you to whichever patient decided that they didn't want to take it home with them and just left it in A&E. So thank you for that. I have already jumped into this one, so hopefully it shouldn't be too long. And not surprisingly, I'm going to try and time the review for this with the upcoming Netflix adaptation. Why would I do that, I wonder? Who knows? I did mean to mention as well, sorry, I almost forgot. I always do this, I do apologise. Yes, as I was saying there earlier, the Iron Man in the US was changed into the Iron Giant, which is why the late 90s animated film is called The Iron Giant. It kind of confused me because I wasn't sure whether it was supposed to be a different story, and there are marked differences. But the reason why I mentioned the film is that, yes, it is an adaptation of The Iron Man, but also interestingly, with having done The Incredibles recently on our other show, Maybe Movies, The Iron Giant was directed by Incredibles director Brad Bird. So, as I've done before, we might at some point cover the animated The Iron Giant on Movie Nostalgia, so keep an eye out for that. Can't say when it's going to be, but we might sort of get around to that one as well. This is what I'm going to be doing next. I've already leapt into this. So thank you again for watching this and for indulging my rant, or my rant, my chat about books. This will most likely be the last what I just unread from this iteration of the Bohemian Book Corner, as unfortunately I have to vacate these premises within the next couple of months. So I imagine by the time I finish this, that will be wherever I end up. So we will see you from there. I think I shall leave you by saying whether your own interaction with health, whether it's mental health or physical health, however you're working your way through that, make sure that you never forget the mantra of Big Pharma, and that is that there is no profit in cure, only treatment. So until the next time, be seeing you. This one is more focused. Focus?
Focus.
That's what I was thinking.
Sorry.
Now you caught me there, buddy.
Yeah, good.